Hello children, today I'm going to read you a story about the Large Family. So if you haven't read books about Large Family before, they are a family of elephants. We have Mr. and Mrs. Large, who are Mummy and Daddy, and the children are Laura and Lester, Luke and the baby. In some of the stories, Grandma's in there too, but in this particular story today, she isn't in it, but maybe in other stories that I might read to you. So this story is about a day when Mrs. Large really isn't feeling too well and everyone tries their best to help. I'll show you the front cover. Off we go. Mrs. Large opened one eye and peered out at the morning. She forced open the other eye, dragged herself out of bed and set off downstairs to the kitchen, where Mr. Large had kindly already started the children on their breakfasts. You can see that's how she's starting to wake up. You know, kind of sometimes if you're not too well, it's just like so hard, isn't it, to get out of bed. You look ghastly, dear, said Mr. Large. Don't say that to Mummy, said Laura. Mummy looks beautiful, exclaimed Lester. Boofull, Mummy, cooed the baby. Yes, of course Mummy's beautiful, said Mr. Large. I meant she doesn't look well. Are you feeling all right, dear? There they are around the breakfast table. Here's Mr. Large, Daddy, and Mrs. Large, looking none too well, a little bit sad. As a matter of fact, I don't feel too good, admitted Mrs. Large, but I was going to take them all to the park later on. Then there's the shopping and the lunch and there's... Well, you don't have to worry about any of that, said Mr. Large. It's the weekend, so I'm in charge. Go on, back to bed with you. We'll take care of everything, won't we, children? You bet, said Lester. Mrs. Large trudged back upstairs, clutching a nice hot water bottle to keep her warm, and sank back into the bed, which was actually still warm from when she'd got out of it. What a treat, she said. Here she is, snuggling down into that bed. Downstairs, Mr. Large was organising his troops. That's his family. Right, men, he commanded. We're not all men, said Laura. Oh, you know what I mean, said Mr. Large. Well, troops then, all right? I'll take the worst job. That's the washing up. Lester, you can tackle the hoovering. Luke, picking things up off the floor. Laura and the baby, just some general dusting and cushion plumping and tidying up. Quick march, 1, 2, 1, 2. Off you go. Mr. Large turned on the radio and found a jolly tune to cheer everyone along, and soon they were all busy with their tasks. Here they are, as Mr. Large is telling them what their jobs are. This is how an elephant dusts, apparently. Upstairs, Mrs. Large was jolted back from the brink of sleep by the astonishing amount of noise blasting up through the floorboards. She listened anxiously for a while, but could soon tell that they were mostly happy noises, so she wedged a pillow around her ears and decided to ignore it. Mrs. Large had just drifted off to sleep when she was rudely awoken by the baby, who was giving her a thorough dusting. Sorry, Mum, yelled Laura, rushing in and grabbing the baby. The baby began to scream and hung on to the bedclothes so that they both fell over backwards, taking the bedclothes with them. Here's baby dusting Mummy. And this is how, when she hung onto the bedclothes and they all tumbled backwards, the bedclothes went with them. This isn't proving very restful, Laura, said Mrs. Large, as she tried to untangle herself and the baby from the bedclothes. Eventually they bundled them back onto the bed. "Mummy Huggy," screamed the baby. "Want my mummy, big Huggy now." Laura stuffed the baby under her arm and wrestled her out of the door. "Don't worry, Mum," she called as she closed the door behind them. "I'll take her down to Dad." "Don't want Dad," bellowed the baby. "Want Mum, want Mummy." I'll show you the pictures because they're lovely illustrations. Here's Laura, here's the baby. Laura's trying to get her out and calm her down. The baby's just wants a mummy. Mrs. Large sorted the mangled bedclothes out and snuggled back down. Suddenly, there was an almighty crunch from downstairs, and the Hoover stopped very quickly. The bedroom door opened, and Lester looked in. "It's all right, Mum," he said. "Nothing broken, it just sounded bad." Luke's head appeared underneath and around Lester's knees. "That's right," Mummy agreed. "Nothing to worry about. Just go back to sleep. Everything's under control." There they are. Mrs. Large was finally dropping off to sleep when Mr. Large crashed open the bedroom door. "We're all off to the park now, dear," he announced. "We'll get the shopping on the way home, then we can bring you up a nice lunch." "Thank you, dear," said Mrs. Large. "I'm having a lovely rest." Mr. Large beamed and blew his wife a kiss as he backed out of the room, closing the door very quietly. At last, Mrs. Large dozed off. But what seemed like just 5 minutes later, she was woken by a smell of burning. Just then, Laura put her head round the door. "Dad says not to worry about the smell," she said. "He's getting the lunch and he wants to know if you'd like something." "What exactly is it?" asked Mrs. Large nervously. "Well," said Laura, "it was something special in a special sauce, but just had a little look, well, actually rather a long look, at football on TV. So now it's cheese sandwiches." "I think I'll carry on sleeping for a while, thank you, dear," said Mrs. Large. "Perhaps I could join in at tea time." "Righto," said Laura, slamming the door as she rushed off to tell Dad. Mrs. Large closed her eyes and tried to relax. What seemed like no more than 3 seconds later, the door crashed open again and all of the children came charging in. "We're going to play football with Dad," yelled Lester. "In the garden," said Luke. "Now," said Baby. "Are you feeling a bit better?" asked Laura. "Mummy better?" asked the baby. "Big Huggy?" "A bit better," said Mrs. Large. "You go and have fun with Daddy, and perhaps I'll be all right later on." "Big, big Huggy," wept the baby, as Lester scooped her up and carried her out. "Big Huggy, Mummy, now." "Don't worry, Mum," said Laura. "She loves football once she gets going." The door slammed shut for what seemed like the 100th time. Mrs. Large winced and slithered down under the covers. Joyful sounds came drifting in from the garden, and Mrs. Large smiled happily, knowing that everyone was okay and having a good time. There they are in the garden, children, having lots of fun. Just 5 minutes later, Lester burst into the bedroom. "Dad says, where are the bandages?" he yelled. "Don't worry, Mum, it's not the baby." Dad tripped over the rake. "They're on top of the bathroom cabinet," said Mrs. Large weakly. After a while, the door opened again and Mr. Large came in, carrying a tray laden with tea and cakes. The children sneaked in behind him and hung around. I think they're probably hoping for something, don't you? The baby didn't lurk for long. She climbed grimly onto the bed and clasped her mother round the neck. "Big huggy," she said. Where's baby? I think she's missing Mum, don't you? "Everyone out," ordered Mr. Large. "Let Mummy have her rest now. She's not well today." Mrs. Large heaved herself into a sitting position and patted the covers. "That's all right, dear," she said. "I've had a very restful day and I'm feeling much better now. Why don't you all join me for tea?" "Well, if you're sure," said Mr. Large, and everyone piled onto the bed to tell Mrs. Large all about the day she'd missed. There they are, climbing onto the bed. And there they are, all settled on the bed. And it would appear that everyone, except for poor Mrs. Large, is fast asleep. See Daddy's poorly head where it tripped over the rake. But Mrs. Large does look quite happy, doesn't she? That's it for today, children. I hope you've enjoyed that. I'll see you soon.